Hello, and welcome to the Healing Our Cultural Wounds podcast. I'm Paul Croce. I'm recently retired from 30 plus years of teaching history in academic classrooms at Stetson University. It's in DeLand, Florida, USA. Now I'm applying what I've learned from students and from scholarly research to talk with citizens of all ages about their concerns and their hopes. Mine too. This podcast series has stories from our past and our present about hurts from the ways we disagree. And it provides ways to turn those obstacles into opportunities.
Please note that all copyrighted images and audio belong to their original creators. This video is for educational purposes only. Thank you and enjoy this episode of the Public Classroom Podcast.
Welcome to the Public Classroom Podcast and our series, Healing Our Cultural Wounds. Today, the first episode, Learning Across Our Differences. That's the starting point. I'm Paul Croce, and I have devoted my career to teaching and writing American history at Stetson University. It's a liberal arts college in Central Florida. And as I get older and grayer, I'm noticing ways to be of public service outside the academic classroom in the public classroom, as with this series, Healing Our Cultural Wounds. How, you might ask? How about learning across our differences? And sure enough, that's the topic for today. I notice what you probably do too. In the U.S., we've gotten very polarized. Disagreements are natural, even constructive. But the hostilities, treating fellow citizens who hold different views as enemies, that's not so healthy. One scholar even called the binds that our cultural wars create doom loops for making our already big problems still worse. For all those troubles, the biggest trouble may be our inability to work with each other to figure out how to deal with the problems. As with this portrait in the cartoon in the upper right, of two people arguing over the very same facts right in front of them. Is it a 6 or is it a 9? From the fruit of my work, I now set a table for healing our cultural wounds. Can we talk? But first, can we listen? Finding paths to healing is the goal of this series. But how are we going to do that? Especially when disagreements are sharp and positions are entrenched, how can we listen across polarized differences to start any kind of healing? Where to begin? I noticed that the common approaches in response to the challenges of deep differences are either fighting or courtesy. Fighting shows recognition of the depths of differences, with people lining up in polarized camps to support their own side. Courtesy shows recognition that this isn't such a healthy way to live, together at least, while offering hope in courtesy to get past our glowering differences by just being nice. Being nice is good. I suggest a sturdier way to support it. Ways to deal with and even make constructive use of our polarized differences. As with the fights, fully recognize the polarized positions, while adding more substance to the path of courtesy. I aim to balance the openness in learning new things with confidence in our convictions. In short, listen as if you're not certain, speak as if you are. One of our students at Stetson offered a good exhibit of this posture. Take a look. This approach involves treating the fighting spirit as a kind of canary in our cultural minds. Before the last century, miners would bring this little bird to alert miners of problems in the air underground before those poisons could hurt them. In the same way, outbursts of fighting or moments of brittle courtesy can serve as wake-up calls to engage in more listening across our differences. Treat those differences in that fighting as kind of our canaries. This approach has potential to reframe polarization from fields of battle to scenes of debate, even heated debates, then as crucibles for choosing public direction and as workshops for construction of improved politics. You ready? We don't need to agree. In fact, we learn more if we don't. But can we come together? As the Beatles sang in a song of that name, can we come together, at least just to listen to each other? The Beatles sound pretty confident in their song, Come Together, when they say, I know you, you know me, Maybe that came easily to the Fab Four, but for the most part, that's not so easy. But I propose that with listening, we can learn more. Here are some ways to up our listening game. First, I offer a framework for listening across differences. Each one of us can bring our own resources for healing our wounds. I invite you to comment down below on what resources you bring. Your knowledge, your talents, your hopes. I bring William James, the founder of American psychology and a philosopher with a knack for the social media of his day. Brief essays and popular lectures. He lived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He's widely respected as a wise guy, with his insights gracing the introduction to college textbooks and greeting cards snatching up his quotations. I find him useful because he scurries behind each contrasting position to understand why each person has those respective commitments. Then he talks about ways that we each pay attention to particular parts of experience for support of those views. And he presents practical ways each commitment addresses different problems, even as he recognizes that they can become misguided. Yes. But then he suggests that awareness of all we don't know can provide context for respecting the contributions and the limits of each commitment of every human being. I call this the James framework, or just the frame that I'm using, in short. A set of resources, really, with pieces pulled from his whole life for turning the problems of cultural warfare into opportunities. With this approach, I admit two shortcomings right off the bat. It's a helpful framework, okay, but it's not the only way to heal our wounds. Here's what this historian has culled from years of culture watching. Can you find other ways to heal? Please comment below. In addition, the approach I have put together does not offer total solutions. That makes for poor politics. And you know what? I would make a very poor politician. My slogans would run out of bumper before they would have a chance to stick. Instead, my approach is for dropping seeds in minds and in hearts, for listening across differences, with hopes that they can bloom into healthier political futures. It's not politics, I'll grant you that, but it's a program for future politics, built on small steps now in our own everyday life, with hopes for more growth in time. Starting with shortcomings that I just admitted is also a way to take the pressure off of any one of us. We all have them. With the enormity of our problems, keep in mind that no one of us can solve them all or should. Relax, you're off the hook. But you should be on task to make a contribution. This is what James calls the legitimacy of some. Doesn't it sound like a great Victorian phrase? Some light bulb moments, some contributions, some chances for improvement, with some hopes for adding them up. I've turned my hopes into a plan. As you hear mine, consider what might be your hopes and your plans. Please comment below. I'd love to see them. A little bit now about the person I'm tapping for this frame. William James lived from 1842 to 1910. This meant that as a child, he could have heard firsthand from the veterans of the American Revolution. And in his maturity, he circulated with those bringing newfangled modernism. He also lived between different ways of looking at the world, including whether to follow his family's wishes or to set out on his own. The appeal of idealistic outlooks or fact-based empiricism. And especially he felt the tensions of religion versus science. He grew up deeply troubled by the respective tugs of his family's spiritual outlooks and the science and medicine he studied on the way toward earning his only degree. He earned an MD in 1869 in scientific medicine. The breadth of his education meant learning a lot of very plausible ideas, but then, as he wrote in a notebook when he was 21, he would learn other ideas that were ready to call into question the grounds of what he had learned the day before. That was his educational doom loop. This tug of war between competing outlooks pushed him to what he called an abyss of horrors that would grasp my imagination and imperil my reason. Tough class, huh? Well, he was deeply ambivalent and downright depressed until he decided that his problem was not in the difficulties about making the choices, but in expectations of a need to make such a stark choice in the first place. He resolved to use his free will to sort through the different views, adopt some, reject others, but scrutinize them all. He turned his problem ambivalence into an opportunity, a chance to develop decisiveness for remaining open to and making use of a range of contrasting views. His openness would serve as a pool of creativity and a keynote of all his life work with attention to mind and body in his psychology, subjective and objective perspectives in his philosophy, spirituality and science in his religious thought, and hope with discouragement in his own proposals for dealing with the problems all around him. So now I turn to my second section of my presentation today, using theories as resources for learning across differences. Yes, theories can be not just abstractions, but resources we have. They're kind of our GPS mental systems for figuring out direction. James's theories are important academic accomplishments, yes. They are also resources for the James frame. The first is what he called his psychology of philosophizing. He observes that every person has a philosophy. Yes, not just those eggheads. Maybe not in fancy and formal terms, but a conception of the frame of things which everyone carries with him under his hat, as he put it. The psychologist in him detected that even the most rational and adamant views begin with sentiments that encourage leanings in those directions. These sentiments, shaped by traditions, shaped by interests, artistic attractions, personal tastes, and feelings, serve as the founding assumptions for each person's outlooks. In other words, as he put it, where they feel most at home. Then, once a person's views have been launched, sentiments keep those views nurtured and drive their relation to kindred and contrasting ideas. That's how ideologies form. Sentiments explain the construction of worldviews as diverse as all of us, which then fuel the jostling competition of different ways of looking at the world. The second James resource is his psychology of selective attention. The world is full of facts in abundance, with events galore, as my mother would say, on large and small scales. The mind deals with this avalanche of phenomena, he suggests, as a sculptor works on stone to make that sculptor's own particular statue. That's one's own experience. For any one of us, we are all sculptors of our own worlds. And yet other people, with their own sentiments, serve as their own sculptors, selecting and neglecting parts of the world around us to produce other statues, but from the same stone, the same worlds of experience all around us. Those are also rational positions, but ones based on different guiding assumptions, different sentiments of rationality. For all the talk these days of distracted attention, what's happening is really a lot of different attention. People disagreeing are literally also paying attention to different parts of the world. For example, supporters of immigration emphasize the history of diverse ethnic groups joining the American strand, while advocates for restriction worry about job competition and newcomers using services. Each stance points to different parts of American life. Awareness of the different emphases can provide grounds for discussion if members of each advocacy group ask questions about how the other side would deal with the problems that concern them, rather than only remaining devoted to talking about their preferred stories and to issuing slurs about the other side. What if we talked with each other by thinking of our differences at different selections rather than, you're just wrong? The third resource is James's pragmatism, which he explicitly presents as a response to challenges from disagreements. Recalling his own youthful development, he calls pragmatism a way to understand, as he put it, the good things on both sides of the line. Each has some good. Who knew? We can actually learn across those differences then. Later in life, he was ready to lay out a path to getting there beyond just being nice or compromising one's own convictions. In calling pragmatism, as he put it, a method for settling metaphysical disputes that might otherwise be interminable, James told a story, putting a squirrel at center stage. While time in nature usually brought serenity, on one occasion, James had to work at calming his camping buddies in a fight that had erupted about one of these lively creatures doing its own thing, clinging to one side of a tree trunk. You can probably picture it yourself. Walk up to a squirrel on a tree, and where does it go? To the other side. As each person moved toward it, it would scamper quickly to the other side of the tree, steadily out of view. The heated discussion did not bother the squirrel, but the two-legged mammals were in full dispute over the question. Did any one of them really go around the squirrel or not? The sides were obstinate, the glowering around the campfire, until James suggested asking what each of them practically meant by their claims. One group meant that the person was moving in each cardinal direction, north, east, south, west, very much around the squirrel. True. By contrast, the other group observed that for each of those stances, the squirrel kept its belly turned toward the person who could never find a way fully around the squirrel. With his pragmatism, James observed how each proposition focuses on different parts of experience. Then he suggested considering each in terms of what purpose it served. The first group was right for playing ring around the squirrel, but the going around skeptics rightly pointed out that the lack of any engagement with the creature was just as true. Now, in place of going around, plug in words like freedom or justice or other major goals of human striving. And this little scene serves as a microcosm for larger disputes. The disagreements are real, even as pragmatism offers a way to clarify the points of friction. Freedom for which groups, you could ask, for example, or what types of justice, in other examples. Awareness of what the conflicts are being fought over can enable addressing them in their parts, one step at a time. Focus on purpose can even serve as a way to enlist people in disputes to take on problems that started the conflicts in the first place. Redirecting the heat of hostility toward the particular unfreedoms or specific injustices at hand would do more to address the disputes than fighting those in disagreement. As mentioned, this approach does not solve the conflicts, even as in fact it can reduce the reason for the disputes in the first place. This is why James called his approach meliorism. Meliorism. That's just a means for improving or ameliorating, good SAT word there, settings racked with problems or conflicts. How can we ameliorate or improve them? He associated his meliorism with what he called live possibilities, pointing toward the future. Don't stay rooted in the past. In particular, each contestant would take on part of the problem most in tune with their own convictions, since they provide a resource. Their resource is the passion for those specific parts of the experience that they care the most about. This would mean less outrage and more action. In the long run, this approach may actually work better than complete solutions whose absolutism have their own problems. James's fourth resource is already implied in the earlier ones. Pluralism is his word for diversity, in particular about not just social differences in race, gender, sexuality, class, and ability. He applies pluralism to differences in ways of looking at the world. It's what emerges when human minds pay attention to different parts of the world and make selections to develop their own outlooks. For each person, this explains how the same identical content of experience is felt so differently, as he put it. And in groups, it explains how so many different views emerge within a plurality of people. And for those dealing with those differences, the pluralist outlook provides a basis for what he called living sympathy, to see how others interpret in such diverse ways. What's it like to think like someone else? Got sympathy for other people? That awareness can still lead to friction. When facing those plural differences, James's fifth resource can encourage potential for sympathy by placing each commitment, proudly held, within the broad uncertainties that are beyond human ingenuity. He taps the truism about no one's perfect with a metaphor also drawn from his fondness for hiking. He portrayed all that could be known as an immense forest with all experiences potentially available to all. Social circumstances set limits, and each theory or belief serves as a trail. Think of it, walking through a forest, or a blaze to guide you on that trail, to guide through that trackless forest of human experience. Those are important because with them, we can now use the forest. It's no longer a place just to get lost in, as he put it. Those paths are vital. They're real. But don't mistake that path, your own one, for the whole forest. Even those brilliant mental blazes leave unexpressed almost everything else in the forest, which remains out of human reach. He took pride in those human achievements, but maintained humility about what he called the ever, not quite, of each compared to the whole. With the James frame, each theory or particular outlook has potential to be useful, especially when dealing with particular corners of our forest of problems. But no one of them is absolutely a transcript of reality. Most people can readily admit this idea in theory, at least, even as practical settings and especially fighting scenes can prompt forgetting of these very wise insights. No one theory or point of view can grasp the whole. Really? What do you think? Please comment below. The James frame offers a humble reminder. What about you? Well, now I turn to my third section, which I call Practical Ideals. This approach for encouraging listening and learning across differences seems idealistic, if not downright impractical, to most of us attuned to the realism of competitive self-assertion while striving for answers to win arguments. That's the norm in modern times, isn't it? Look around, including in the realism of our politics as usual. This politics carries the assumption that one side will actually win by proving the truth of its views, and the other side will realize its errors, the errors in their way, and readily put down their own rhetorical weapons. Those ideals, in being supposedly realistic, rarely happen. Most people are not persuaded only by facts and rational explanations anyway, and the criticism, the humiliation, and the defeats generally serve to encourage oppositions to then redouble their efforts. The frequent lack of recognition of these reactions to public debates contributes to the dramatic qualities of recent politics. Scholars have called our politics a spectacle, more like sporting matches or theater, rather than public deliberation. Others point to the way in which we're tribal, or living with theaters of the already predisposed. These insights point to the showmanship of modern politics and modern culture. That is what most people do. Lots of people act with this drama because they believe in this idealism at the heart of political realism, working with the assumption that the correctness of one side will get all others to join them or just keep quiet while the winners carry on is a reminder of the joking scene. You've probably seen things like this, the joking scene of English speakers frustrated when foreigners don't understand them. Rather than trying to learn a different language, there's comedy in attempts to speak English just louder, as if the force of decibels will simply penetrate the foreign brain. I'm suggesting another way, a way to communicate across our differences. Yes, it's idealistic, and yes, I'm an egghead. I look at the world through rose-colored glasses, but it's an idealism with a very realistic impact. When people disagree with you, yes, it's a pain, but instead of trying to defeat them, listening can enable learning about what has been motivating them, even if you have to hold your nose about their actions and the policies they endorse. This is actually the approach of leaders who realize the importance of coordinating diverse people and plural perspectives, which is always going to happen in every organization, in every community. That's more effective than leading with put-downs and choosing favorites. Dropping the denunciations can also lead to a more effective politics than remaining in one's own silo. Listening to others can be a first step in competing effectively, in persuading them, or at least for reducing their impulse to attack. And that itself is progress. I hear some meliorism there. In addition, listening to different views can even bring what I call a little bit of extra credit. More refinement of one's own views, now no longer lulled by the constant affirmation of the comfortable echo chambers of those who already agree. These approaches work well with democracy. Politics of the people means lots of people, different people, many with dramatically different views. Demographic diversity has added still more variations on the viewpoint diversities all around us. Democratic coexistence means acceptance of plural worldviews as expressed with the rights to assemble, the right to worship, to speak, the right to debate, even as those with the most absolute commitments live right alongside other citizens who disagree with them vehemently, or who find those other views reprehensible according to their own contrasting absolute commitments. The First Amendment, enshrined in our Constitution, provides those rights, but it provides no suggestions alongside about how to pull this off without hostilities. They didn't write that in the Constitution. Got ideas for supporting free speech while not descending into fighting? Please comment below, or wait to compare your thoughts with my suggestions coming next. A classic method for pulling this off has been what's called objective neutrality. Yet, claiming no truth has proven difficult, especially when that neutrality itself has been regarded as yet another competing belief. The proposal here is not endorsement of neutral no truth, but a suggestion to look at each person's commitment as one among many truths, all jostling for our attention in the public square. This approach is akin to Abraham Lincoln's shout-out for the power of public sentiment. He didn't say shout-out, but, I'm saying that in our time, about his shout-out for public sentiments. The collection of all those diverse angular truths. Each angle has its own truth, to their own sense. He said public sentiment goes deeper than politics, but actually makes all those political statutes and decisions and political doings possible. That program for pluralism, with listening and learning across differences, is a method for coexistence, and even for thriving in the shaping of public sentiments. One way or another, some shape is going to emerge. Will the public be filled with sentiments of hostility or courtesy? Or will our public sentiments be populated by multiple truths, with people ready to listen to them, debate them heartily, take up their challenges, and put them to work? That's a promising portrait for public life, but it can seem out of reach. The practical sides of this idealism generally require longer stretches of time than the quick strikes of fighting. In those longer runs, this approach of listening allows time to build toward this promising future. On the way toward these long-term benefits, this approach can actually help the conventional approaches for dealing with our culture wars. Listening to the opposition can actually recruit supporters for those doing the fighting, and it can sustain the courteous when the conflicts make just being nice hard to sustain. In addition, stepping away from the fray and from rational argumentation for some human interactions, just plain human interactions, and turning discussions to the lived implications of each particular commitment can actually allow problems to be solved livingly, as James put it. Personal interactions and everyday experiences are some of the encouragements that civil rights activist Loretta Ross endorses, not just for calling people out, people in denunciation, but for calling people in who disagree with each other. These are some of the benefits that can emerge from approaching disagreements with parts of the James frame. When facing problems, his psychology suggests considering views in opposition not so much as wrong, but incomplete. Those limits compared to selections from other parts of experience points to his pluralism, with recognition that each view stands in relation to the multitude of other ways of seeing the world. This awareness can serve as an opener to taking pragmatic action steps for reducing the problems that surround the contrasting views in the first place. And through all this, his unblinking gaze at the vastness of experience, a point of mystery for the religious and of wonder for the scientific, can serve as solace for any one person who might feel discouraged about their own limitations for dealing with so many problems. Listening and learning across differences can seem not only idealistic, this approach likely looks downright impossible, not only because the problems are so big, but also because of widespread assumptions about all or nothing solutions. The common focus on fixing problems wholesale and right away has put shade on small steps. However, small steps count. In fact, they're the only way to get big changes started. In the language of social science, each one of us is kind of like a statistical zero. You know, when you see those charts, when you see 10% here and 5% there, and oops, this column is so small, it's a statistical zero. You know, those are the numbers that are so small they don't show up. So, in a world of billions of people and uncountable problems, each one of us really is but a speck. But in our own sphere, we can have impacts. And in combination with others, still more. Statistical zeros are not stuck in the basements of social impacts. They may not persuade many, and the disappointment from that may encourage just giving up. Maybe you felt that yourself. In the spirit of dancing as if no one is watching, however, take some action in tune with your commitments. Try cleaning up one river, helping one pregnant woman, giving one homeless person something, some food. Listen to one lost soul. Develop one clever idea. These are the ideas I'm suggesting. How about you? Got action steps? Please make a comment below. Maybe we can put some of our statistical zeros together and they might add up. Then, once the word spreads, you might be part of a wave to change the world, or to start a wave. This, my fellow statistical zeros, is the power of listening and learning. It's not an absolute superpower, and it's not a sure thing, but it's a way to use your own superpower and connect with others to tap theirs for increasing the chances for a better world. James put it this way: each attitude being a syllable in human nature's total message, it takes the whole of us to spell the meaning out completely. Rather than just wringing our hands about the culture wars, this culture watcher has drawn on his resources to develop an approach for listening and learning across differences. It's really just a set of tips here for healing our cultural wounds, one step at a time. And it's an elaboration of my father's rule to leave the place a little cleaner than the way you found it. I still remember that. What's your approach? The public classroom looks forward to hearing from you. So does the world. Please comment below. We'll never all agree, and that's fine. James himself said, "People differ, thank heaven, but come together enough to hear what makes the next person tick," as the Beatles sang in their song. And I'll present the instrumentals now. This podcast from the Public Classroom series, Healing Our Cultural Wounds, it's episode 1, Learning Across Our Differences, is dedicated to presenting approaches to enable more listening to those who disagree with each other, not to promote agreement, but to let all parties thrive, even to put some of those bothersome others to work on our problems. Imagine that, approaching someone you disagree with saying, "Oh, that's interesting. Get to work, will you?" At the Public Classroom, I'm Paul Croce, and I work here with Devin Hernandez and Tara Batista to produce this podcast series, The Public Classroom. Stay tuned for future essays and podcasts providing approaches and context to help you learn across differences. If curious about the sources used in this podcast, which I spoke about in this last time, please see the description below.